It was supposed to be a quiet, heartwarming Christmas party. My mom, recently widowed, wore her best sweater and a hopeful smile. I was proud to bring her, to let her feel a bit of cheer after everything she'd been through. But then, my boss, drunk and smug, pointed at her and made a cruel joke that echoed across the room. People laughed. She didn't. She just lowered her eyes and quietly walked out. And in that moment, I knew I would never forgive him. If you've ever watched someone you love get humiliated and felt powerless in the moment, you're not alone. This story isn't just about revenge, it's about dignity and standing up when silence isn't an option. Stick around and tell me, what would you have done? I've worked at Crawford and Gray Marketing for almost 5 years. It's not the most glamorous job, but I liked it enough. I was a reliable assistant, organized, punctual, invisible in the best way. The kind of person you could trust to remember every birthday, every lunch order, every missed signature on a contract. And for the most part, I kept to myself. Office politics weren't my thing. My boss, Raymond, was the opposite. He lived for attention. Loud, flashy. The kind of man who thought sarcasm was wit and bullying was leadership. But I tolerated him. We all did. You sort of had to. This past year had been hard. My father passed away in April after a long illness. My mom, Carol, had been married to him for over 40 years. Losing him was like losing a part of her spine. She tried to stay composed, for me, but I could see the way she'd linger at the empty side of the dinner table, the way she'd walk slower through the grocery store, almost like she hoped she'd disappear. So when the office Christmas party was announced, I surprised even myself by asking if I could bring her. It was a long shot. Most people brought spouses or dates, but I figured maybe this would give her something light to look forward to. I thought it'd be good for her to dress up, meet new people, feel human again. After a bit of awkward stammering, I asked Raymond during a staff meeting. He smirked but said sure. The more the merrier, he joked. Let's make it a full family circus. I tried not to read into that. I wanted to believe it was just his usual bad attempt at humor. My mom was hesitant at first. I don't want to intrude, she said. This is your work thing. You're not intruding, I insisted. You just sit and smile politely. That's literally what half of these people do anyway. She finally agreed. That Saturday, she showed up to my apartment a little early. Her hair was freshly combed, her soft gray sweater pressed and tidy. It wasn't fancy. She wasn't fancy. But she looked nice. Classic. She held a small tin of homemade cookies, something to offer the office, she said, even though she didn't know anyone. That was just who she was. Always thoughtful. Always quiet in a way that made you feel calm around her. We arrived at the venue, a rented banquet room downtown filled with twinkling lights, cheap wine, and forced cheer. I introduced her to a few colleagues. Some were sweet. Some just nodded and went back to their drinks. Raymond, of course, made an entrance. He swaggered over in a velvet blazer like he was Hugh Hefner, already half drunk. He clapped me on the back and looked at my mom with a grin that made my stomach twist. Well, well, he said. You must be Emily's sister. My mom chuckled politely. You're too kind. I'm always kind, he winked, especially to vintage guests. I laughed nervously, hoping that was the end of it. I steered her toward the dessert table, but I saw the look in Raymond's eyes. That smug glint he got when he thought he was the funniest guy in the room. The night went on. The music got louder. People loosened up. My mom sat in a corner, sipping ginger ale and smiling at people she didn't know. She looked small but content. And then came the moment. Raymond stood to make a toast, slurring slightly, swaying a bit, holding a plastic cup of champagne. To another year of success, he shouted. To the best team in marketing, and to our esteemed guests tonight, including Emily's lovely +1. People turned to look. My mom looked up too. Raymond pointed. There she is, decked out in her finest World War II memorabilia. Look at that sweater, folks, straight out of the Eisenhower era. The room erupted in laughter. It was loud, messy, awkward. My heart dropped. I stared at my mom. Her smile faltered. Her eyes flicked down at the sweater she had worn so carefully. And then, without a word, she stood up, walked quietly across the room, and left. No one noticed. Or if they did, they didn't care. I couldn't move. I was frozen, humiliated, furious. But I stayed seated. I stayed still, like always. But something inside me cracked that night. And I knew this would not be forgotten. I didn't chase after her. I should have. I know that. But in that moment, surrounded by coworkers laughing at a joke that wasn't funny, I felt nailed to my chair. My cheeks burned. My hands clenched the hem of my dress under the table. I couldn't tell if I was more embarrassed for her or ashamed of myself. I stayed for 10 more minutes, long enough to make it seem like I wasn't affected, long enough to pretend I didn't just watch the woman who raised me walk out of a room full of strangers because a man who signs my paycheck decided to be cruel. Then I slipped out the back. I found her waiting outside, arms wrapped around herself. It was cold, mid-December in upstate New York kind of cold, but she wasn't shivering. She just stood there, eyes locked on the horizon, like it was the only place that wouldn't look back at her. "I'm so sorry," I said. She shook her head. "Don't be. It's not your fault." But it was. In a way, it was. I brought her there. I put her in that room. I laughed at his first joke like a coward. I wanted to disappear. "I just wanted you to have a nice night," I said, my voice cracking. She finally looked at me. Her eyes, those quiet, thoughtful eyes, were tired. Not angry, not hurt, just tired. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "you don't owe anyone your silence." I didn't fully understand what she meant at the time, but those words stuck. All night, they echoed. When I got home, when I folded that sweater over the back of the couch, when I watched her curl up under a blanket and pretend to sleep. You don't owe anyone your silence. The next day at work, everything felt normal. That was the worst part. No one mentioned the party. No one apologized. Raymond passed by my desk and gave me a wink like we shared some inside joke. Like we were on the same team. I felt sick. That evening, I sat alone in my apartment and opened my laptop. I typed his name, Raymond Winters. I added Crawford and Gray and review, then complaint, then harassment. I was looking for something, anything, that told me I wasn't the only one. And I found it, buried in an old HR forum post from 3 years ago. An anonymous user described an arrogant, emotionally abusive manager at a mid-size agency in Albany. It wasn't specific enough to be certain, but the tone, the phrasing, it felt familiar. That's when I remembered Zoe. Zoe was an intern 2 years ago. Bright, fast learner. She lasted 4 months. One day she just stopped showing up. No explanation. Just gone. People whispered about it, said she was too sensitive for the job. I still had her number. I had never used it, but I had it. I hesitated for a full hour before texting. "Hi Zoe, this is Emily. Worked with you at Crawford and Gray a while back. I know this is random, but I was wondering if you'd be willing to talk. It's about Raymond, no pressure, just something happened." She replied in 5 minutes. "I've been waiting for someone to ask. Let's talk." We spoke on the phone that night. Her voice was sharper than I remembered, angrier. She told me stories I hadn't heard, about how Raymond used to joke about her clothes, her weight, how he'd rewrite her emails and then mock her typos in front of the team, how she filed a complaint and nothing happened. "I thought I was just being too emotional," she said. "But now, I'm done being quiet. That was the moment everything shifted. I started paying closer attention at work, watching how Raymond interacted with others. He mocked Melissa's stutter during a meeting. He ignored Marcus's pitch and later claimed it as his own. He openly flirted with the new receptionist while his wife called twice a day, and no one said anything. That's when I realized it wasn't just about what he did to my mom. It was about a pattern, a sickness, one everyone learned to live with. Not me, not anymore. I began collecting emails, screenshots, meeting recordings, anything that captured his tone, his power plays, his manipulation. I reviewed old bonus reports and found discrepancies, year-end gifts missing for certain staff members, promotions denied without clear reasons. I even found a spreadsheet he left open on a shared drive, a budget adjustment, $4,500 listed as holiday hospitality, but the receipts didn't match. Turns out he had funneled money from the staff bonus pool to pay for VIP clients' spa packages. Disgusting. Then I remembered he bragged once, at a summer BBQ, about recording conversations with certain clients, just in case. If he did it, maybe I could too. So I did. At the next Monday meeting, I hit record on my phone. Nothing illegal, just passive listening. But in that 1 hour, I got a golden moment, Raymond laughing about the Christmas party. She looked like she walked in from a nursing home, he said. I should have given her a cane as a gift. That was it. I knew then. I wasn't just angry. I was ready. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about restoring dignity. For my mom, for Zoe, for everyone who ever sat there and swallowed humiliation just to keep a job. And I wasn't going to stay silent another minute. It started with a folder, a plain, boring folder on my desktop labeled Q4 Budgets. Inside, I stored every piece of evidence I had against Raymond: email screenshots, spreadsheets with tampered figures, audio clips of his jokes, even photos from the Christmas party where you could see the forced laughter and uncomfortable faces. But I knew that wouldn't be enough. Not yet. The thing about people like Raymond is, they survive on perception. He wasn't just a boss, he was the face of the office. Management loved him because he brought in clients. Clients liked him because he was loud, charismatic, and always picked up the tab. The board saw numbers and charm. They never looked deeper. So I had to give them a reason to. I made a checklist. Organized. Precise. Step 1. Verify his misuse of funds. Step 2. Gather testimonies from past and present employees. Step 3. Leak the story, quietly, but powerfully. Step 4. Hit the one place that mattered most, the board of directors. For step 1, I went digging into archived financial reports. I didn't work in accounting, but I had helped organize the shared server for the admin team 2 years ago. I knew where the old stuff lived. Hidden in one folder, I found a list of holiday bonuses from previous years, line by line, name by name. And the gaps were obvious. Certain employees, those who'd crossed Raymond, disagreed with him, or simply didn't flatter him enough, received less than half the bonus others got. In one case, no bonus at all. Meanwhile, entertainment expenses kept growing. Spa visits, exclusive golf club receipts, designer liquor gifts. It wasn't just unethical. It was traceable. Step 2 required more finesse. I started with Zoe. She offered to write a formal statement. It was sharp, honest, and damning. Then I approached Melissa. She was hesitant, terrified actually. I need this job, she whispered. I know, I said gently. That's why I'm doing this. Because no one should have to choose between dignity and a paycheck. She didn't say yes that day. But a week later, she emailed me a 2-paragraph statement about Raymond mocking her stutter and assigning her to client calls she wasn't trained for, on purpose. I stored it carefully. I didn't ask Marcus directly. But when I mentioned what I was working on, he simply nodded and forwarded me 3 emails where Raymond had taken credit for his work. No words, just the receipts. Little by little, people came forward. Quietly, carefully, but they came. Step 3 was where things became real. I reached out to a friend from college, Janelle, who now worked as a content editor for a large HR-focused professional blog. She wasn't into gossip, but she was all about workplace transparency. I asked if she'd consider publishing a piece, not with names, but with enough detail to expose the culture of cruelty under a certain executive at a mid-size firm. She agreed, if I had evidence. I do, I told her. More than enough. She sent me a link to an anonymous tip submission portal. I uploaded everything I had except the audio recordings. I wanted those saved for something bigger. Within days, her team reviewed the materials and confirmed what I already knew. This wasn't a one-off incident. It was a pattern. A man in power weaponizing his position to belittle, steal, and silence. Janelle told me the article would go live after the new year. Perfect timing, she said. Fresh start, cold truth. Step 4 would be the most dangerous. The board of directors only met quarterly, but there was an email alias for internal inquiries. Most people never used it. I crafted a formal message using a professional tone, attaching a redacted version of the file I'd compiled: financial inconsistencies, policy violations, HR risks. I included no personal attacks, just facts. At the bottom I signed, submitted anonymously by a concerned team member with supporting documentation. Please investigate internally before this story becomes public knowledge. Then I waited. I had no idea how they'd react. Maybe they'd bury it. Maybe they'd warn him. Maybe they'd fire me. But I wasn't scared anymore. Because for the first time in 5 years, I wasn't working in silence. I was working with purpose. The article went live on a Tuesday morning. The headline was sharp, professional, but unmistakably damning. The culture of contempt: how one marketing executive weaponized power to humiliate his staff. It didn't mention Raymond by name, but it didn't have to. Anyone who worked at Crawford and Gray, and even a few clients, knew exactly who it was about. The story detailed abusive jokes, financial misconduct, favoritism, and a work environment laced with fear and silence, and it included quotes from multiple former and current employees. The blog had a large following in the corporate HR world. Within an hour, it was being shared on LinkedIn by consultants, HR managers, and even a few ex-Crawford employees who added comments like, "Glad someone finally said it," or "This is long overdue." I watched it unfold from my desk, sipping coffee as if it were any other day. Raymond didn't notice at first. He strolled in late, as usual, carrying overpriced espresso and cracking jokes about how January is just December with worse lighting. He didn't know the article had already reached half our clients, but the tension in the office was different. People were quieter. Eyes darted toward him, then away. Marcus didn't laugh at his jokes. Melissa stayed glued to her screen. Even the receptionist barely glanced up. By lunchtime, he knew. He burst out of his office, face flushed and jaw tight. "Who's spreading lies?" he barked into the open air. "Cowardly little rats. If you've got something to say it to my face." No one moved. Then he stormed into the hallway and slammed the door to the break room. 5 minutes later, an all-staff email landed in our inboxes. "I'm aware of a slanderous article circulating about our office. It's baseless, defamatory, and legally actionable. Anyone involved will be held accountable." It ended with a thinly veiled threat about breach of loyalty clauses. I saved a copy of that email immediately. Classic Raymond: blame, threaten, deny, never reflect. But that afternoon, another storm hit. The board of directors responded to my anonymous submission. I wasn't supposed to see the message, of course, but Zoe still had a friend in the finance department, someone who had access to executive calendars and interdepartmental memos. She messaged me with a screenshot. The board had scheduled an emergency internal review for the following Monday. Topic: Executive Conduct. R. Winters. That was the moment Raymond realized he wasn't just dealing with gossip. He tried to control the narrative, called a staff meeting that Friday to clear the air. We all sat in the conference room while he paced like a caged animal. "This is the cost of success," he said, voice calm but forced. "People get jealous. People twist stories. But I've built this company into what it is. I've brought in millions. Don't let one smear campaign undo that." Then, he looked right at me. "Some people," he said slowly, "don't understand how business works. They think being offended is the same as being right." I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just stared back. He was nervous. You could see it in the way he tugged at his cuffs, the way his voice cracked when he laughed too loudly. He knew someone close had turned on him, but he didn't know who. After the meeting, he tried to reassert control. He randomly reassigned Melissa to a low-visibility client. He started showing up early again, sending curt emails about accountability and team alignment. He was spiraling, but the more he tightened his grip, the more the cracks showed. Janelle's article was now syndicated on another HR blog. A well-known LinkedIn career coach commented under the repost, "What's worse than a toxic boss? A toxic boss with power and no oversight." The comments snowballed. Anonymous reviews began popping up on Glassdoor. Employees past and present spoke up. A pattern was forming, and it was public now. The final nudge came from inside the company. An anonymous tip, not mine, was sent to the board's ethics committee. It included a voice recording of Raymond bragging during a staff dinner about how humiliating someone in front of a crowd makes them easier to control. The tipper had saved the clip from last year's off-site retreat. Someone else had been watching, listening, waiting. It wasn't just me anymore. What started as one daughter avenging her mother had become something bigger, a reckoning. And Raymond had no idea how close the fall really was. If you've ever wished someone would finally face the consequences of their cruelty, this is the part you've been waiting for. The lies are cracking, the walls are closing in. What would you do if justice were in your hands? Stay with me, because it's about to get real. The days leading up to the internal hearing were tense. No one said a word about it, but we all knew. The email had gone out from the board's office. Mandatory presence required for executive conduct review. All department leads will attend. Closed session. It was scheduled for Monday morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Raymond tried to carry on like everything was fine. He smiled too wide. Greeted people by name. People he never acknowledged before. He brought in coffee for the admin staff one morning. Half of them didn't touch it. His charisma had curdled into desperation. Me? I played it calm. I kept my head down, completed my tasks, smiled politely when spoken to. But inside, I was counting minutes, checking and double-checking my file, reviewing the recording, listening to it over and over again, Raymond's voice, gleeful and slurred, describing how making fun of old people lightens the mood. It wasn't just a quote anymore. It was a weapon. Sunday night, I didn't sleep. I laid everything out on my living room floor. Printouts, files, timelines. I was no lawyer, no corporate executive. But I knew how to tell a story. I'd learned from my mom. Quiet dignity always had more power than loud cruelty. I organized my evidence into 3 categories: financial misconduct, the misused bonus funds, spa receipts, and falsified client entertainment expenses, verbal and emotional abuse, the staff testimonies, screenshots of degrading emails, and notes from ex-employees. Reputation damage, the public articles, social media backlash, and client concerns about leadership culture. I didn't attach my name to any of it. Not yet. I wanted the facts to speak first. Anonymous sources had power when they formed a chorus. And by now, we weren't just one voice, we were many. At 8:15 Monday morning, I arrived at the office early. The hallway was quiet, unusually so. People walked with eyes lowered, but every movement felt sharp, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. At 8:45, Raymond walked past my desk. His suit was too crisp, his tie too bright. He gave me a glance, sharp, suspicious, and for the first time, he didn't smirk. He was scared. "Wish me luck," he said dryly. I didn't answer. He disappeared into the boardroom. 15 minutes later, an HR rep approached me. "Emily," she said gently, "the committee would like to speak with you." I nodded. I had expected this. Inside the room, the air was cold. 5 board members sat along one side of the table, serious-faced. A compliance officer tapped notes into a laptop. Raymond sat at the far end, arms crossed, smile gone. For once, he looked small. "Emily," one board member began, "we've received several reports and supporting documentation regarding Mr. Winter's conduct. We'd like to hear from you directly." I opened the folder I'd been carrying. No shaking hands, no cracked voice, just a steady breath, and then, I didn't want to do this. I waited a long time. But when my mother was publicly humiliated at a company event, I realized the damage here runs deeper than bad jokes. It's a pattern, and it's hurting people. I passed them the printed timeline, the folder of testimonies, the spreadsheet, and finally, the flash drive. "This contains an audio clip from a staff dinner," I said. "I think you'll want to hear it." No one interrupted, not even Raymond. He just sat there, jaw tight, staring ahead, like he knew the walls had started closing in. The air in the church basement buzzed with soft murmurs and the clatter of folding chairs being set up for the women's ministry planning meeting. It was a quiet Wednesday evening, just like any other. Carol entered with a tray of cookies, smiling tightly, her southern charm turned up to 11. But behind her calm eyes, something colder churned. I stood in the back of the room, clutching a small folder. Inside were the final pieces, printed screenshots, legal notices, and the damning photos Jenna herself had posted, but never expected anyone to dig up. My hands were steady. I wasn't there to scream or create a scene. I was there to let truth do what it always eventually does, rise. Pastor Elaine called the meeting to order, her voice warm and familiar. I waited patiently as the group prayed, chatted, and discussed holiday food drives. Jenna sat near the front, flipping through her notes, occasionally throwing glances over her shoulder. She hadn't spoken to me in weeks. She thought I was done, that she had won, that the humiliation she inflicted on my family would stay buried in private tears. When the conversation turned to choosing volunteers for the Christmas mentorship program, a role Jenna had been campaigning for, I stood. "I'd like to bring something to the group's attention," I said, calmly, clearly. Heads turned, eyes widened. Jenna's smile froze. I walked to the front and handed the folder to Pastor Elaine. I had emailed the documents to her earlier that morning, but she hadn't opened them yet. Now, with a trembling hand, she flipped through the first few pages. A sharp silence cut through the room as she read. The screenshots from the anonymous bullying accounts Jenna had used, traced to her IP address. The photos from the wine bar, her laughing with the man she swore she had no interest in, during the same week she accused Carol of seduction. The fake complaints to the school board, targeting Carol's son. Every piece, every lie, stacked neatly, undeniably. Jenna stood abruptly, her chair screeching. "This is a setup," she barked. "This is some kind of witch hunt. She's jealous. She's always been jealous." But no one was looking at me. They were all looking at her. Elaine rose from her seat, a calm but stern expression on her face. "Jenna, I think it's best if you step outside for a moment. We need to review this as a group." "I'm not going anywhere," she shouted, red-faced. "You're all going to listen to me now." But it was too late. The weight of her actions had found their moment, and there was no shouting loud enough to drown it out. Her own words had come back to haunt her, Publicly, undeniably. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply sat down next to Carol, who gave my hand a small squeeze. And for the first time in months, I breathed. For the first time in months, my house was quiet. No shouting, no slamming doors, no whispered conversations full of manipulation and shame. Just the low hum of the refrigerator, the chirping of cicadas outside the window, and the sound of my own breathing, slow, steady, finally calm. After everything unraveled in that courtroom, after Mara's perjury was exposed, after Kyle stood up and told the truth, and after Judge Holmby ruled that every cent of Dad's trust would remain frozen pending investigation, something inside me had shifted. I was no longer living in survival mode. I was standing in my own power. That weekend, I changed the locks on the house. Mara's things were still scattered in the guest room. I boxed them all up, every designer handbag, every pair of stilettos she used to clack around in as if she owned the place. Every framed photo of her with my dad that used to make me ache inside, I wrapped in newspaper and sealed in cardboard. I left the box on her front porch with a single note. Do not return. All further contact must go through my lawyer. Then I got to work on everything else she'd tried to tear down. I met with a new accountant, one who didn't know my father or Mara or the tangled mess they'd made. He helped me trace the trust's expenditures and begin the long, painful process of reclaiming what was mine, not out of greed, but out of principle. I also reopened Mom's studio. It had been collecting dust for years, left untouched like a sacred ruin. But when I unlocked the door, the sunlight poured in, illuminating her old canvases and jars of dry paint. I knew then, I wasn't just reclaiming the house or the trust. I was reclaiming her memory. One night, while I was organizing old photographs for a legal affidavit, Kyle stopped by. He stood awkwardly on the porch, hands stuffed in the pockets of his hoodie, eyes downcast. I just wanted to say, he began, I'm sorry for how long it took me to realize. You didn't deserve any of it. I nodded. I didn't hug him. I didn't rush to forgive. But I didn't slam the door either. Thank you, I said, for finally telling the truth. Before he left, he asked, what happens now? I looked at the sky, burnt orange, fading into blue, and said, now we heal, separately. That answer surprised even me, but it felt right. I wasn't interested in rebuilding broken bridges anymore. I was building something new, stronger, cleaner, mine. I hired a trauma therapist. I started volunteering at the local women's legal aid clinic, helping others who were being silenced or tricked out of what was rightfully theirs. It felt like planting something, small seeds of justice, in a world full of weeds. Every step I took was a quiet refusal to be the woman Mara had tried to paint me as, bitter, weak, disposable. No, I was standing firm. And while the final verdict on Mara's fraud would still take months, the important battle was already won. I had my voice, I had my truth, and I had my mother's legacy beating strong in my chest. And from now on, no one would ever rewrite my story for me again. In the weeks after the confrontation, the silence in the house changed. It was no longer heavy with tension or unspoken hurt. It was peaceful, warm, even. I sat by the kitchen window one morning, sipping my coffee and watching the snow melt off the trees. Ellie was humming upstairs, packing her things to head back to college. There was no urgency in her voice, no sharpness, just calm. When she came downstairs with her bag, she paused by the door and looked at me. I feel lighter, she said simply. I smiled. Me too. There were still messes to clean up, of course. Legal papers to finalize, business accounts to untangle, letters from old clients who had worked with Russ and now wanted to continue under me. But each step forward felt like a reclamation of my name, my space, my peace. I didn't expect forgiveness to come easily, and I didn't force it. Forgiveness wasn't the goal. Clarity was. And I had that now. One day, I drove past that old red barn where Russ and his brother used to host their holiday business parties. It was shuttered, empty. A for sale sign hung crookedly from the fence. Funny how something that once loomed so large in my life now felt like a footnote. But perhaps the most surprising part came during Christmas dinner that year. Ellie and I sat around a table that looked a little emptier, but somehow more whole. No tension, no pretending. Just two women who had fought through darkness and made it to the other side. I cooked her favorite, rosemary chicken and honey-glazed carrots. She brought a bottle of wine she'd saved from a class trip to Napa. We toasted quietly. To healing, she said. To freedom, I added. That night, after she'd gone to bed, I stepped outside. The snow had started again, soft and steady. I pulled my coat tighter and looked up at the sky. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I thought of all the women out there, sitting silently at Christmas tables, trying to hold it all together. I wanted to tell them, you're not crazy, you're not weak, you're just tired, and that's okay. But you don't have to stay tired. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be quiet. As I stood there under the snow, I wasn't thinking about revenge anymore. I was thinking about strength, the kind that builds in silence, then rises like a storm. And for the first time in a long, long time, I felt whole.